Okay, let's take two here on the Meat and Potato Show, Conservative Talk and Awesome Rock, and we are talking to the author of the book, Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. And I had said to you earlier before we got disconnected about the disconnect on the presidential debates. And that Chrissy was talking about, you guys are talking about fantasy football. We have much more bigger problems, and you had started in with that you don't think that these people even understand the larger problem. So, Patrick Wood, please take it from there.
Well, yeah, all I was saying is that they haven't mentioned anything about sustainable development, the United Nations 2030 agenda. Agenda 21, all the things that are being implemented in our country that are anti-constitutional. And I'd like to hear them say something at some point, but I haven't heard it yet. And my guess is they're probably ignorant. And I'm not saying they're hiding something and, they know all about it and they're trying to deceive us all. I just think they're ignorant, honestly, Christopher.
Yeah, they don't know, right.
The implication of that is, no, things are not going to change no matter who gets elected.
Well, then if that happens, let's say, I think it's going to come down to either a Trump or a Cruz against Hillary Clinton, because she's already, the Democrats, and again, when I saw all the voter fraud going on, I thought about you, I thought about the technology and technocracy behind all of this. Is that it's already predetermined. It's already going to be pre-decided. And so when we get down to the wire, I mean, who are going to be the people who actually, say to them, this is what's actually going on? Or are we going to be destined to always be looking at conspiracy theory? My point being is that already you can see on social media, you can already see all over the internet that there's already hints of voter fraud in Iowa. And the election season hasn't even started. It's just Iowa, it's just the caucus. But this is part of it. This is part of what technocracy does. It controls, it takes over, it demands a certain skewing of a way to get us to either believe or get into a certain type of mentality that we end up not only, we're not just deciding who our president is, but it already has been decided, sir. Go ahead.
Well, it may have been decided, but as in most previous elections, they end up with both parties in their pocket, so that no matter who gets elected, they win.
Sure.
I have predicted the last several elections based on Trilateral Commission connections. It's worked out pretty well, actually. This time, the closest connection we have to the Trilateral Commission is Hillary Clinton.
You're right.
Her husband, Bill, was a member,
yes.
Of course.
Yes.
President Clinton. Her campaign manager, John Podesta, is a member of the Trilateral Commission. And on the Republican side, originally you had Jeb Bush. He's very tightly connected to these people. The very first endorsement he got right at the very beginning was from Henry Kissinger. And, that says something, I think.
Yes.
The rest of them, Cruz and Trump, it's almost just a sideshow right now. I just can't pay attention to it.
Let me stop you there. Because somebody like Jeb Bush, it's very interesting you said that. Already got the endorsement from Henry Kissinger. Already has links to Trilateral Commission. But yet, here we are, he's polling at like 3, 4, 5%, He's really down there. In fact, the general population is asking, it's like, when are you going to drop out? Here comes the question. Does that matter what the general population is demanding?
Let me tell you what happened to his daddy. That's George H.W. Bush,
Yes.
back when he was running against,
Reagan.
well, he was running with Ronald Reagan, or
Right.
he was in the primary
He was
against Ronald
running
Reagan.
against and then went with him, right.
And yeah, and he got bounced out of the primary down in Florida, of all places. That's where Jeb is now. And it looked like his political career was in shambles at that point. He had his tail between his legs. He made a fool of himself at one of the last speaking engagements he had in Florida. And everybody was saying George H.W. Bush is finished. And yet, when they around, George Bush pops up as the vice presidential candidate. And there you go. He was brought in as vice presidential candidate under Ronald Reagan, and he continued the Trilateral Commission legacy. And I have to say that he was one of the most disgraced candidates I've ever seen in my lifetime, my career. But that's the guy that they wanted in the White House. And so he couldn't get in as president, so they put him in as vice president.
Sure, right.
So, you know, you take Jeb Bush for what he is. He may get bounced out. He may drop out. But I still have concerns even about the rest of them. I have concerns about Trump, and I have concerns about Cruz as well.
Well, let's go. Talk about that. And then I'll get into some of the stuff in the email that you sent me a moment ago.
Well, yeah. You know, in my opinion, I really don't care for any of the candidates. So I'm not.
Neither do
People are going
I.
to get mad at me if I say something about their candidate, you know.
Yeah.
But look, Trump so far has said nothing of substance about what he's actually going to do.
Yes.
We don't know what he's going to do. He's giving the same kind of speeches that Barack Obama gave back in 2008. Hope and change. We're going to make America great again. That's I love that. I'd like to see America great again, but he's given virtually no ideas on how he's going to do that. So, in my opinion, there's a lot of talk and there's not a lot of substance, and that makes me very nervous. Plus the fact that the guy seems to be a little bit on the narcissistic side. That is, it's all about him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that quality. Personally, I don't like that quality in a person running for president.
Yes.
Then you have Mr. Cruz, who appears to have, and actually he does appear to have a pretty good track record as far as how he's voted in the past. But people have criticized the fact that his wife was a vice president of Goldman Sachs. She's since resigned, or no, she's on leave, excuse me, right now, while the campaign's going on. But for a guy who's supposed to be uber conservative and kind of on the outside in a sense, you know, for the American people or with the American people, he has not yet explained, you know, how his wife relates to this as being a vice president of Goldman Sachs, because Goldman Sachs, in fact, is a Trilateral Commission connected company. And they have been one of the most highly criticized banking institutions in the world.
Yeah.
So that bothers me about him. You know, it's just not all on the table.
Let me stop you there. And I'm looking at somebody like Rand Paul, who dropped out suddenly out of the race. Now listen, I know personally people here in central Massachusetts who are endowed and embedded with the libertarian Ron Paul. They were with Ron Paul in 2012, and now they're with Rand Paul. Went to CPAC last year on their ticket, and it was a great event. And it was so charged. It was seen as, oh, Rand Paul's, he's the outsider guy. Again, his numbers are very, very low. He didn't even, I mean, if it was a horse race, the guy didn't even place. I mean, he came up last and basically with a bunch of other people. Then, poof, out of nowhere, he drops out. It's just the Iowa caucus. And I was watching it. I was like, wait a minute, what? I went, okay, after Super Tuesday, okay, I could see Rand Paul saying, you know what, we don't have the numbers. I'm going to drop out. I'm going to go back to the Senate and do what I can do there. I could see that. But boom, out of the outset of the gate, Iowa caucus, Rand Paul drops out. I'm smelling a rat here, sir. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, who knows? Maybe somebody had a little chalk talk with him in the back room. I mean, who knows? I'm kind of sorry in a way he dropped out, just because his voice is not going to be heard.
Right, and I'm not a big Rand Paul guy myself, but still, I like the idea that the Republican ticket is that big and that it's that shaking and moving there. I really like that because it actually, well, at least it gives the American people the impression that we have a choice, and it's good theater. So, but I just scratching my head here. It's like, why did Rand drop out so early? It's like, what the hell's going on here? That's just my opinion.
Well, he probably saw that his money was going to be spent, basically for nothing, and he'd run out of money, and that would be the end of him anyway. I feel badly for candidates that run up huge bills on their own account, and then they're left with debt, if they lose, whatever. I think that's very foolish on their part.
Right.
So maybe he's just being a realist and saying, I'm not going to run up debt for this. I'm not going to go in a hole. And, I'm just going to, this is the cash I got, and I don't have it. I'm going to pull out.
And that's a possibility. Right. Sure.
Yeah. But those aren't really the issues in my mind right now. That it doesn't matter who gets elected to president. It could be Hillary Clinton. It could be Donald Trump. It just doesn't matter, in my opinion, right now, because the thousands and thousands of technocrats that have been hired and buried in the administration, in the agencies.
Yeah, sure.
Like gain. People that have been buried in there are unaccountable. You have no hold on them whatsoever what they do, and they're creating rules and regulations that are not based on any law. They're not, and some of them are patently unconstitutional.
Yes.
And nobody is holding these people to account. Now, what's happened, at least in the last 10 to 15 years, is our country has been ripped to shreds by these technocrats. We must get rid of these people. Our government needs to be cleansed and purged of this technocrat mindset that leads them to think that they know what's better for you than you do.
Right. And possibly, like you said earlier before we got cut out, is that maybe these people that are running, they're just ignorant of it. Ignorant meaning the strict definition of the term, just not knowing. Just not knowing of it. Not that they're ignorant meaning stupid. Ignorant meaning they just don't know. That's true.
Well, that's right. That's why I wrote my book, Technocracy Rising, in the first place, so people wouldn't be ignorant. And I wish more people would read it, but these days, people don't even want to read books. I've never seen such a mentally lazy generation in my entire life.
Well, here you go, sir. This is somebody that you're speaking to who reads lots and lots of books. And I want to bless my mother, who's long since departed. She was a book-a-day person. I grew up in a house with books everywhere, and as a young child, I opened many of them up. Let me read you something here, and I wanted to do this on the show. It's a quote it's a passage from Robert A. Heinlein's book, "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress." It's a science fiction novel, but I've been reading this book, and my good friend, the president of the Worcester Tea Party, Matt O'Brien, gave this book to me as a Christmas present. And he said, you'll like this book. And I've tagged and highlighted passages here, just as I did in your book. And so I'm going to read just a quick couple of passages here.
Mm-hmm.
I quote from Robert Heinlein. Think about it. If a bill is so poor that it cannot command 2/3 of your consents, It is not likely that it would make a poor law, question, and if a law is disliked by as many as 1/3, is it not likely that you would be better off without it? But in writing your Constitution, let me invite attention to the wonderful virtues of the negative. Accentuate the negative. If you were to spend, I'm paraphrasing here, if you were to spend 5 years in a study of history while thinking of more and more things that your government should promise never to do, then let your Constitution be but those negatives. What I fear most are affirmative actions of sober and well-intentioned men granting to government powers to do something that appears to need doing. There is no worse tyranny than to force a man to pay for what he does not want merely because you think it would be good for him. The power to tax, once conceded, has no limits. It contains until it destroys. And here we go, once again, that despite all the rhetoric, and this is from a science fiction novel written in 1966. It's just a simple science fiction novel. I mean, you can read any novel. Patrick, you've read a billion of them yourself. You know what I'm talking about. And you read those passages, and that epiphany, that light goes on in your head. It's like, Jesus Christ, this guy was talking about this back then. It's like, and yet here we are. And even though these candidates get up there and they promise all this stuff, it's the same crap over and over again. They promise, well, we're going to reduce this, we're going to reduce that. They're not really going to do that. Patrick, take it over from here.
Well, no, they're not. And you know what probably needs to be done is entire agencies need to be axed. But that's never going to happen. You know it's not.
No, it's not. No,
the feds are protecting their turf.
They'll
now.
nibble around
they figured
the edges,
out that
right.
The American people are, displeased, and they're protecting their turf. Just look at the Bundy affair and the Burns affair.
Right.
They're protecting the turf now.
The Hammond thing up in Oregon. Right. We're going to get into that in a second. Sure, go ahead.
So they're not going to give up that easily. And if a president were to come in and say, we're going to get rid of the EPA, now I don't know what would happen to him. I don't know how it would happen to him. But I would give such a person about 2 months to be in office. He would either go out feet first, or he would go out in disgrace like Richard Nixon. They'd pin some scandal on him and force him to resign.
Sure, right.
Or whatever. Or maybe they put him in a straitjacket. Who knows? But he wouldn't be around very long, I don't think. So, that kind of draconian measure, even though it really was probably called for, isn't going to happen.
And it is what's called for. And
it'd be nice to abolish the IRS.
Right, and we hear this.
And it'd be nice to give all the land that's owned by the federal government should be given back to the states. What a novel thought. It's their land anyway. And if somebody came in and said to the BLM and Fish and Game, said all the land that the U.S. government currently holds will summarily be given back to the states, and the states will now have control over that land. I can't see anybody coming in. No, none of the current candidates are going to come in and do that. Not a chance.
My question to you on that point is, why? Why is the federal government so hell-bent on taking over so much property? I have a theory. Give me 2 seconds here. I have a theory because I call it the oh shit scenario. Something happens. I don't know, an asteroid hits the planet. Nuclear war. I don't know. Something happens. I call it the oh shit scenario. And because they hold domain over this land, therefore they can mine it, use it, timber it, ore, copper, uranium, whatever. Because if you look at a map, I've seen many of the maps. It's mostly in the western part of the states, and what's out there? Mostly mountains and rock. Well, what's in mountains and rock? Lots of minerals, lots of ore, lots of stuff, lots of oil. That's why I call it the oh shit scenario. Is that in case something happens, the federal government can go back and say, all right, we're going to go do this. This will help keep us alive. What do you think about that?
I don't see it being quite that, you know, black and white, I guess. What I see around the world is a massive resource grab going on simultaneously. It's happening in other countries too.
Well,
other countries don't have
why?
a BLM.
My question
right?
is, my larger question is the why. Why do they want all this stuff? What is your end game here? Why?
Well, resources, the resource of the land is where all the wealth is.
Okay.
It's been this way for thousands of years.
Sure.
It's not money. It's not money. It's not stocks.
Right.
You know,
it's what's in the ground.
What's in the ground, and
it's what's in the ground.
Wealth, every nickel of wealth has come, and the whole world has come out of the land.
Sure.
And these people know that. These people, like the banksters at the top, you know, like the Rockefellers and the Goldman Sachs of the world, they understand money like crazy, but they're running to the end of their pyramid. They can't run it anymore. They have to somewhere abandon money as far as your wealth is concerned and convert that into resources.
Right.
And this is what's happening around the world. You follow what I'm saying?
I do, sir.
Look, and let me back that up. The central banking system around the world is on life support right now. We criticize them. There's been books written about them, about how nefarious they are, like you know, the creature from Jekyll Island. And yet, right now, all of the central banks of the world have expanded their balance sheets to the point of bankruptcy. And I'll just warn people, central banks can and do go bankrupt. So, you know, as the whole debt pyramid gets bigger and bigger, there will be a time when the banking system cannot support it anymore. Even Karl Marx knew this back in the 1800s. It can't go on forever. So there's going to come a time when the entire debt-based system falls apart, and these people know that. And so as they grab resources and put resources under the wing of government, for instance, controlled by a very few number of people, the idea in the end is to put all of these resources into a common global trust that will be managed by trustees. Mm-hmm. That will deal out licenses to go access those resources on a very selective basis. For instance, you don't need to go apply for a timber permit. You're not going to get it. But if you're a Weyerhaeuser or some other big, you know, lumber company, global lumber company, whatever, you'll get a lease on it.
Sure.
Don't, you know, if you fall into some money, don't think you're going to go out and drill an oil well anywhere in this country by going to get a permit from the government to sink a well out there somewhere. You're not going to, you will not have access.
Let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. Here's something that I was watching. Look at the drop in oil prices. Look at what is, folks, ladies and gentlemen on the Meat and Potato Show, listen. Look at the drop in oil prices. Before, a year or so ago, it was like, what, $4 a gallon, plus or minus? We're looking at $80, $100 a barrel, okay? And then what happened? The impetus was drill here, drill now. Guess what America did? We started fracking, we started drilling, we're starting doing it. And then suddenly, like Patrick's talking about, those in charge say, well, wait a minute, we can't have these independent people drilling their own, wait, we can't have that. So what's happened now? The price of oil has been depressed. It's been depressed. Now what's happening? All these independent operations that happening in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Montana, all these places, even in Alaska, these private operations, they're all going bankrupt. They're all going out of business. Why? Because they can't sustain at $20 a barrel. Big OPEC can, because they're like, it's 20 bucks a barrel. We've seen this before. We'll just hang out. We just won't build the new Taj Mahal in Dubai tomorrow. We just won't do that. No, we'll just wait. And so they control the prices. Once they see that the independent entrepreneur is capitalizing upon it, oh, we can't have that. That's entrepreneurialism. We can't have that. That's the independent person. We can't have that. We've got to control it. Depress the price. Boom. The price goes down. Boom. Down to 20 bucks a barrel. Now these people are going out of business. Patrick, where am I wrong on that?
Well, you're not wrong in a general sense, for sure. I have had, my background is economics, by the way, so I watch these things. I watch markets very carefully. And I have felt for several weeks now that the price of oil is under a greater attack than just from regular investors that would invest in oil. There's something very fishy going on with that market. And I can't tell you exactly what it is. I really don't know. But it's not acting like a normal market would act. And so at this point, with the price of oil being so low, and with the economic activity that follows it going down like a rock in the ocean, I have to wonder if there's not a little bit of, giving Humpty Dumpty a push here to push him off the wall altogether.
Right.
And I'll tell you why I say that. This is important. This is an important point, a data point for people to get. The head of climate change at the United Nations, Christiana Figueres, she's numero uno at the United Nations on climate change. And she said this last year in a press release. This is a direct quote from her lips. Quote, "This is the first time in the history of mankind that we're setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution." Now, if anybody needs to read between the lines on that, this woman has declared war on capitalism and free enterprise. Because that's all we've had all these years. This has been what has sustained us. This has been what has made us great as a nation. And this woman says that the United Nations is intent on completely destroying capitalism and free enterprise.
And what's interesting is that the depression of oil prices in the past, at least in my lifetime, and Pat, you and I have gray hair on our head, and so we can look back in the past, and I remember that when there were depressed oil prices, economically, we flourished. Less you have to spend on fuel, less you have to spend on transportation, and all these things. The whole country is dependent upon transportation. Hell, the whole world is dependent on transportation. The less you have to spend on that, the better you can deliver goods, and the lower prices you can give, the better the market economy. I think what I've seen is this time is that the fact that oil prices are depressed, economists are actually calling for an economic collapse. And again, I'm hearkening back to when you and I were younger. It's like, oh, gas is cheap. Let's go do stuff. Even businesses, let's go do stuff. Oh, great, prices are, we can deliver more. We can do more. The economy actually boomed. But now here we are with depressed oil prices. It's a different paradigm. Oh, it's going to collapse now. Bringing back to what you just said, that quote that you just said. We've been doing this for so many years throughout the 20th century that this is part of they see this, the technocrats see this. It's like, this is kind of like holding their balls in our hand here. If we can control the price of oil, control the price of transportation, control the price of their energy, we've got them by the balls. Go ahead, Patrick.
Here's the goal of the elitists, the United Nations, the Trilateral Commission, technocracy in general, is to create a system where where all of energy is controlled and rationed to the people. And there's a war on carbon. You know this. There's a
Yes.
war on coal. There's
Sure.
a war on oil. Some people in the United Nations are saying they want to completely stop extraction of any hydrocarbon from the earth by the year 2030. Now, what they don't say is they're taking away 75% of the energy generating capacity of the planet. If they stop carbon, 75% is going to go poof, just poof. How are you going to replace that deficit of energy? They don't have a plan. They have no plan for it. It would mean economic ruin to the world if the energy was not there. If they're successful at what they say they're going to do, it will literally destroy the economic fabric of the world.
Now,
Having said that, let me take you
go ahead.
let me take you back in time just a bit to a gentleman that was written about in 2014 by the name of Jeremy Rifkin. He's a futurist, he's an elitist, he speaks to people like the Davos group and the Bilderberg people and so on. He's very, very highly placed as a futurist. And the title of this article that appeared in the Guardian newspaper in England, of all places, it says, the headline says, "Radical new economic system will emerge from the collapse of capitalism." That's just the headline. And he says down in this article, he's quoted all the way down in this article, it's incredible, but he is saying exactly what we're saying, except this is what the global elite are hearing themselves. We're figuring it out. I'm figuring it out. You sound like you're figuring it out a little bit too. But this is what people like Rifkin are telling the global elite. And he says, one of his quotes down in here, he says, "This is the first new economic system since the advent of capitalism and socialism in the early 19th century. So it's a remarkable historical event, and it's going to transform our way of life fundamentally over the coming years."
Oh, God.
He says, "It already is, we just haven't framed it."
Oh, yeah, there you go. And here's the thing. Patrick, you have far more intelligence than I do. I happen to be a street guy, but if there's one thing I understand being on the street is that capitalism is the be-all and end-all of anything that ever happens between any interaction of any individual. I work a simple job. I run my own contracting business. I make personal deals, and I make my money off of doing those deals. And what I give to my clients and I give to my customers is a service. They pay me for it. I'm able to take that money, purchase other services from other people, and expand. This is something that goes back to, and I told you before, I grew up in a house of books, and my mother was a great historian. And she said that for years, eons, that people bartered and traded products, commodities, things that they built, things that somebody had, even resources. Maybe somebody had some timber, maybe somebody had some wheat. Somebody else built something. It was all bartered and traded. This was the birth of capitalism. This was the birth of the interchanging of goods and services. This new paradigm, it seems like to me, sir, I've read your book, you know that, and when I finished your book, all I could think to myself is like, are these people making this up off the top of their heads? They're completely throwing away not just decades, not just eons, but thousands of years of bartering and trading between civilizations, the entire fabric of history, Rome, Phoenicians, Aztecs, pre-Columbian America, the whole thing. We're throwing all of this away, a tried and true tested example of barter and trade, i.e. capitalism, for this new paradigm that they just made up off the top of their heads. Go ahead, sir.
No, that's exactly what they're saying. And
yeah, exactly right.
Why we would treat them as intelligent people is beyond me. They have PhDs and stuff like that, but there's a lot of dummies that have PhDs, so that's no criteria for greatness, right? But what really strikes me is that these people have no common sense, at least from our point of view. And the way I look at it personally, this is just my personal opinion, is that the inmates have taken over the asylum.
That's right. They have.
They put on the white coats, they put on the necktie, they look the same as the old staff, in charge of the asylum, but they're crazy people. Now, clinically crazy, no, I can't say that. But these people are off their rocker if they think they can just waltz into the world stage and tell the rest of the world, you're going to do it our way right now, or it's going to be the highway for you, is absurd.
Let's go in. Let's take that right there. Let's look at somebody like Bernie Sanders. Again, socialism. And one of the things I want to play here for a second, and just bear with me, it's about 2 minutes here. I'm going to play this here. It's a quick history about socialism and progressivism. Let's listen to this video really quick, and then I want to ask some questions on that. Hang on.
Activity, and I want to talk to you today about socialism. The S word is all in the news. Chris Matthews spent a lot of time last week trying to get Hillary Clinton to explain the difference between being a Democrat and being a socialist. Bernie Sanders is nipping at her heels in Iowa and New Hampshire, and he's a qualified socialist now. He's a democratic socialist. And I wonder what that means. It seems to be the ongoing rebranding of the big government crowd. When I was a kid, they were liberals, and over time the word liberal became the L word. You weren't allowed to use it anymore, and liberals became progressives. Progressives, of course, go back to the late 1800s, when it was a very authoritarian, very top-down, very elitist philosophy that literally believed that some people were smarter than the masses. That's where we are today, and apparently progressives not radical enough. So now Bernie Sanders is a socialist, but a democratic socialist, and I wonder what the difference is. A socialist, by definition, is someone that wants to see the elimination of the monetary economy, the elimination of prices, and literally the elimination of private property. It's always been this utopia sort of thing that's never been achieved by anyone. But to get from here to socialism requires a lot of centralized power. You have to give up your liberty. You have to give control to government to rearrange things from the top down. In practice, that's been a disaster. In practice, that's killed millions of people. In practice, it's led to abject poverty and all sorts of problems across the world. So now we're not socialists anymore. We're democratic socialists. Democracy, to me, means disintermediation. Democracy means shifting power away from government back to the people. Democratic socialism can't possibly mean that. At best, it can mean the majority of the people that show up to vote taking stuff from the other people that didn't win that vote. That's no different in practice than plain old socialism.
Okay, so there you go. There you go. There's that piece that's in there. And Patrick, are you there?
I am, but I couldn't hear the audio on that.
Okay, well, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Basically, so you have this idea, and I prefaced the question with Bernie Sanders, that now he's a democratic socialist. And there was the whole history of progressivism. I read Jonah Goldberg's book, Liberal Fascism. I traced the history through that. That now it seems that, okay, it's still the same ilk. It still seems that they're trying to rebrand their name, trying to rebrand what they do. And I've had the pleasure of, and I use the word pleasure because it's so rare that I get to meet these people, of videotaping the Progressive Labor Party here in Worcester, Massachusetts. They have tons of protests, tons of meetings. I go to those meetings. They know who I am. They know they completely hate the fact that I'm there. We see this rebranding. It's always a rebranding. This is what progressives do. This is what socialists do. They always say, oh, this time we're going to get it right. This time we're going to get it right. But it's the same old thing all of the time. It's still everything that you've worked for, we're going to take it from you, give it to those less fortunate. Patrick, where do we stand now with somebody like Bernie Sanders, who has garnered so much public support for his presidency? I mean, to the point where he's chomping at the bit at Hillary Clinton. And getting back to what you said earlier, that even if Bernie Sanders loses, we could possibly see Bernie Sanders as a vice president or somewhere in the cabinet making policy for Hillary Clinton. Go ahead, sir.
Well, that's true. We could. I would point out, I think, and point back to Zbigniew Brzezinski. I hate to keep bringing his name up, but he's important in this. When he wrote his book, Between Two Ages, back in 1970, the subtitle was America's Role in the Technotronic Era.
Yes.
I believe that's the book that brought he and David Rockefeller together to form the Trilateral Commission in 1973. When he wrote that book, he said very clearly in the book, and by the way, Brzezinski was never a Marxist. He never claimed to be a Marxist. People have pinned that on him wrongly because he wrote about Marxism, but they didn't read the context of how he wrote about it. What he said in his book was that Marxism, and that includes socialism and communism, was merely a stepping stone to technocracy.
Right.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
Now, you know, he's only one guy, granted, but he's a very important intellectual figure in this whole thing. And I think, personally, he had it right. I thought this through, and I think he's absolutely right. Marxism, socialism, communism are not the goal here, but they're a necessary stepping stone to get to the ultimate goal
of technocracy. Right. Of course. That's absolutely.
And here we are with Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. And here's the thing is that, well, let's look at your book, Technocracy. Let's look at the way our education system has changed, which Patrick Wood states in his book. The way it's changed, the way we tailor our education in a certain way to where we don't educate. And I just went to a Pioneer Institute seminar about a week ago on, okay, well, we're not teaching our children proper history anymore. And I had raised the question to these people about this. They thought I had 6 heads. In fact, these people who were actually saying, well, what's wrong? What's going on? And I had mentioned that. Patrick, I almost kind of channeled you here. And when I was at there, I think about I was like, this is what Patrick's talking about. This whole devised plan of Common Core and getting our children inculcated into this writ-rote educational system of just basically regurgitating everything that those on high demand that you teach and demand that our children say, so that they come out as drones into society. These people looked at me like success, and I'm talking to people who were elder statesmen. I mean, gray-haired men like myself. And like you had said earlier, these people just didn't even understand. They didn't even know what I was talking about. And I had mentioned the word technocracy, and I had mentioned the word about Common Core, and I mentioned about how do we, these children are not being allowed to critically think anymore. This is why we have young people jumping on board of somebody like Bernie Sanders. He says the right words, he says the right things, and everyone thinks it's a great idea. What did Mussolini say? The useful idiots? Patrick, sir? Go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. Bernie has a tremendous following across the country, mostly young people, because they've already been indoctrinated in universities and so on to accept Marxism as the greatest new thing. And, it doesn't mean he's automatically going to get it, but just the fact that there's a great percentage, maybe 25% of the country that are championing, it's not a good sign for America.
No,
that means that America hasn't learned a whole heck of a lot from history. Of course, they're not teaching history in school anymore.
Well, there you go. That was my point, and that was part of my question when I was at the Pioneer Institute. It's like, we're not teaching this. In fact, there was a guy. He actually said that I had asked a question. I don't have the paperwork in front of me here. He was an educator from the. He started in the 50s. He's an elder man now, and works in the Pioneer Institute. And I had asked him a question about, why when students come out of our school, that there's this mentality that, America's this evil country. America's a terrible country. Oh, yes, slavery. Oh, and the Constitution was written by white slave owners. This whole negative about America. And so I posed the question to him. And he had said, well, when I was a younger student, it's like I learned that America was a great country. And I was skeptical, and I interrupted his answer. And I said to him, yes, that's good. That's good. That's a good thing. That's a healthy thing, that you question that. Were you ever chastised? Were you ever labeled something? And he's like, no, I wasn't. Here's the difference, sir, I said to him, is that when a child comes out of school today and they read all this stuff about how America's a horrible country, and they say, well, wait a minute, I think America's a great country. They're immediately labeled as a racist. They're immediately chastised. This is the different paradigm. Back in this, Dr. Klein, I think his name was, back in his day, that's a healthy thing, to question. Always question your authority. Remember the 60s? Question the authority. Always, all the time. That's a healthy thing. But today, when somebody questions, oh, wait a minute, I don't believe in this. This is crazy talk. I'm not going to believe in this. I'm going to follow a different route. You are instantaneously chastised. This brings me back to what I said to you a while ago in one of our early interviews about the one person in the room who says, no, the ceiling is white. Remember that, Patrick?
Exactly.
Yeah, but immediately they're chastised. Again, this doctor was okay, he has a different opinion. He came out and questioned things. Great, that's fine. You're supposed to question things. You're always supposed to question things. But today, the paradigm is if you question things, there's something wrong with you. Go ahead, Patrick. Take it from here. I'm at a loss for words here.
Well, I know. The attitude of technocracy in the 1930s towards education, and we see this today, is exactly what you're talking about. They considered education to be what they call the service sequence of society, that they would supply the strategy for. And they believed that education was to be nothing more than a system of continental human conditioning. That's the phrase they used.
Yes.
Continental human conditioning. Now that brings up visions of Pavlov's dog, because Pavlov was big back in those days.
I know.
It's training and conditioning people to have knee-jerk reactions to certain stimulus and so on. They don't want people who can think critically. They want people who can merely follow orders. We saw that kind of mentality reflected, by the way, in the book Brave New World by Aldous Huxley that was written in 1932, looking at technocracy. That's exactly the way it was. Don't think, just do. And that's what Common Core education standards are all about today. That's what No Child Left Behind was all about under George Bush. And there's been other crackpot schemes in education before that. They're all stemmed at removing education and replacing it with conditioning.
Yes.
This is not education, it's conditioning. And I think we probably, as a nation, we need to call it for what it is. It's not education.
And what astounds me is that as more and more people, because here in Massachusetts we've actually gotten a big petition drive, and it's going into our state ballot in this year in 2016 to remove Common Core from the state of Massachusetts. And I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of research into this. A lot of states are doing this. And while there's one side that's saying, oh, this is a great thing, this is the people, this is the communities standing up and saying that, no, we're not going to do this. Again, you have those in charge, i.e. the technocrats, saying, this is crazy. This is crazy. These are right-wing people. These are crazy people that, we know what's better. We're going to develop a new system to bring America into the 21st century. They always paint it with, great language. We're going to bring America into the 21st century with this new educational system. Of course, forgetting the fact that there are already 3 laws in the federal government that forbid the federal government from ever interfering in the private community-based education of our students. But, this is our modern America, folks, that we're talking about. When did the Constitution or laws have anything to do with stopping our elected officials? Yes, we elect them. Remember that. We elect them. When did that ever stop them from thinking that they know better than the rest of us? Patrick, thank you so much, my good friend. Thank you so much for talking to me tonight. Give your website, give your information. We got to get you back on. I can only do an hour here at a time, and every time we get to talk, it's like, oh God, we could talk about this, we could talk about that. It's like, it's unbelievable. Sir, wrap this up, please. Do you have any hope? Is there anything that you see that could possibly change all of this?
Well, I will say that Americans need to dedicate themselves to cleaning up their own communities and rooting out this mentality, this technocratic mentality, this trickle down into every community in America. There's a lot that people can do in their own community, but maybe they're too lazy, maybe they're couch potatoes, maybe they think that some president or some senator or some congressman is going to save them. No. Forget that.
No.
You have to mount your own defense and your own offense in your own community and root it out and start a massive cleansing effort to drive this garbage out from the ground up. It will send a message up to these people. And, in the meantime, understanding the issue is important. You can't fight an enemy that you do not know. That's self-evident. But nobody has known who the real enemy is, and the real enemy is technocracy, folks. It's not socialism, it's not communism, it's not fascism, it's technocracy.
Right.
We need to call it what it is, we need to understand it, and I dare say that's just one reason why I tell people, don't get fooled by listening to an interview like this and think that you're an expert on anything. If we scratch the surface on something, that's great, but people need to get the book and read it for themselves. Hurt their brain a little bit, okay, so spend a couple hours a day for a week, spend some time reading the book. Imagine that, actually reading a book. Come on, people, life is not lived on a bumper sticker anymore. Get rid of the bumper sticker mentality. You've got to spend a little time learning something, and maybe then you will understand what kind of action that you need to take.
Patrick, thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you again, and let's not let it go so long, because these things are not going away. They're not going away. And let's get you on after Super Tuesday, because after Super Tuesday, we'll see what's going on with our presidential candidates, and that'll be a good time to get you back on the show. So let's.
Oh, sounds good. Anytime, I'm be ready to hop back on.
Okay, folks, the book is Technocracy Rising: The Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. You can go on technocracyrising.com. I go on the site all the time. He's in my Gmail. I get all his hits all the time. I read all his stuff. This is why he's on the show. Hello. We're all paying attention here. At least on this show we are. Patrick, thank you so much, my friend.
You're welcome, Christopher.
All right, buddy. See you again.